churches like this all around the U.S. for the last 20 years. And every time I get up on stage, I feel humbled. It's a privilege of standing here before you and having the privilege to share with you some about my beloved country and some about the history and the Bible we share. And as Pastor Shane just said, this, what you see behind me on the screen, is the website that myself and Ronnie, that some of you I understand know, developed in the last few years. It's a website which is all about Bible, geography, and history of the land of Israel. It has in it endless amount of lectures that we created. It has in it 8-hour video of a virtual tour in Israel. So if you can't afford the tour, or if you feel like it's too much trouble to fly those 24 hours, give or take, with the layovers and everything else in between, and you want to watch the tour from your comfort zone in your living room, we're selling those much cheaper than the tour cost. And obviously I happen to have some of those with me tonight, but the website that you see behind me, if you become friends of the Galilee Academy, you can log in and see a lot. And I don't know how good the Wi-Fi I'm connected to in here, but this is one of the things we do. That's one of our daily, so it doesn't have sound, I guess. But anyway, that's our last report that I guess is the most interesting thing for you guys these days. That's the report on the last few weeks or few months in Israel and the war going on in Gaza. I'll close it down because it doesn't have any, can't get the sound, but you can log into our website, which is thegalileeacademy.com, and you get all this information. And what I came to share here with you today is a short presentation about what's going on in Gaza these days, and probably the rest of what's going on in Israel. The vicious attack of Hamas on Israel on October 7 caught me escorting a tour in Morocco. We also do tours in Europe and North Africa, and we were touring a small group in Portugal and Morocco, and this was the day before last of the tour when the war began in Israel. I woke up early morning to get a call from my daughter saying that not only there is war, but her best friend was probably killed in one of those kibbutzes down in the south. She was still waiting for more information to verify the rumor that was verified a couple days later, that her best friend was shot in bed in one of those kibbutzes. And the younger sister of the other best friend was killed in the big music party that was going on there as well. So I'm pretty sure you get at least the headlines you got in here, but what I came to share with you is the story behind. And I have chosen to have this picture behind me. They're probably no longer alive. But that's a young mother and 2 babies who were kidnapped in one of those kibbutzes that morning. And that's a face to remember, because when you think about life in the Middle East and who our neighbors are, that's the kind of people who will kidnap a woman with 2 babies and slaughter them. It's just a little over 108 days since the war began, and we still have 136 Israelis held by Hamas. Most of them are civilians. Now, I don't need to share with you what exactly they're suffering in there, and they are suffering a lot. So some facts to keep in mind and to be aware of. In these days, radical Islam is the main reason for most attacks on civilians and for terrorism around the world. You are getting Muslim immigrants into the U.S. as well, mostly, by the way, in Europe, but I'm not sure how aware you are of that fact. America, that was built as a nation of immigrants, and your grandparents, great-grandparents, who, depending how far it goes, immigrated over here, and this was the place to come to and make new life. And basically create your own life here, running away from whatever bad stuff you had in the old land, old country. The difference is that when Muslims are immigrating, they're trying to change the country they immigrated into their culture. It's kind of a silent, or not so silent, invasion of wherever they go to. There was never, at least not that I know, a peace rally led by Muslim anywhere around the world. The Muslim world never really accepted Israel's presence in the Middle East, as well as the Palestinians. They never pretended they're going into the peace plan. And Jewish institutions were always the targets to attack. When Israel go out to war, civilians are never our targets. We always use very accurate weapon to attack what we consider military targets and enemy targets, and we spend a lot of money on very accurate weapon just to make sure that we don't hit any civilians. We send warnings to civilians to stay away from war zones, which we did before we invaded Gaza. We encouraged the people of the northern part of Gaza to move down south because we were going into war, and mostly because Hamas was using mostly civilian infrastructure and digging underneath them to create places for their military leaders. We opened a safe corridor for civilians to move down, which was, by the way, violated and used a lot by Hamas military powers to move from one place to the other using our humanitarian corridor. We provide humanitarian aid for civilians during war, basically to our enemies. We do follow the Geneva Convention rules when we go out into war. The accusations against Israel made by the Muslim world today is that Israel is committing a genocide, which is obviously not true, not even close to be true. Israel is committing ethnic cleansing. That's also not true, but that's exactly what Hamas did when they invaded the Israeli settlement right on the border on October 7. They said that Israel is an apartheid country, but Israel has 20% of its population Arab, and they are Israeli citizens, and they serve in our parliament. Some of them, the smart ones amongst them, are even serving in the army, understanding that there is no better place for them to live in the Middle East. And the fact that Israel is a colonial power, which is also nonsense. We're not trying to get a hold on anything which is not part of where we are. On October 7, early morning, Hamas launched a few thousand rockets attack on Israel, followed by invading into Israel. What is the Gaza Strip? Any idea? What is it? So let's move to the next. The Gaza Strip is a small section of the entire Israel. You see the entire Israel up there. You should be aware of the fact that um, Israel is actually smaller than Lake Michigan. If you take the entire Israel, as you see here on the map, the yellow thing, including all the disputed areas, could be laid into Lake Michigan and become one big island, not even cover the entire lake. So that's the size of Israel. 313 miles long by 60 miles wide at the widest. In most places, not even. And at the very south end by the Mediterranean, a small section of about 25 miles long by 6 to 8 miles wide is the Gaza Strip. Who controlled the Gaza Strip over the years? So in 1948, at the end of the War of Independence, it was owned by Egypt. In 1967, Israel invading or going into the 6 Days War has taken over the Gaza Strip. In 1995, earlier, in 1987, the peace accord between Israel and Egypt, we offered the Egyptians to take over the Gaza Strip, and they refused. Ever since 1995, the Palestinian Authority got control over Gaza. The early days were with lots of options to get into a better place, but it never happened. In 2005, due to ongoing war in Gaza, Israel decided to disengage from Gaza. We pulled out. There was a Palestinian election, and Hamas won big time. So the most fundamental part won. The Palestinian Authority was thrown out, literally thrown out, in some cases from buildings who were 10 stories high, was thrown out of the Gaza Strip. The history of the land goes, in February of 1947, the UN sent, between 1919 and 1947, Israel was under British mandate. Between the end of World War I and shortly after the end of World War II, the British had a mandate given by the UN over this part of the world. In 1948, at the 15th of May, the British left. In 1947, the UN sent a committee to the Middle East to try and figure the issues between the Jews and the Palestinians. The committee made some suggestions, decided that the British mandate will end on 48, and that the land will be subdivided between Israel and the Arabs. You can see you can't. You'll see it now. You can see the division that was supposed to happen between the Jews and the Arabs. David Ben-Gurion, the Prime Minister of Israel, said yes to that suggestion. And he said, in light of the Holocaust and in light of the fact that we would like to establish a safe haven for Jews around the world, we're going to take whatever we can. The Palestinians said no, and immediately after, the War of Independence began. It ended with Egypt taking over the Gaza Strip area, and with Jordan taking over most of what is the West Bank. We'll deal with what the West Bank in just a minute. The refugee issues of the Palestinians was created back there in 1948 when the war began. As soon as the British left, every Arab country surrounding Israel invaded Israel. It was Egypt in the south, supported by Moroccan and Libyan and Tunisian forces that came all over from North Africa. It was Jordan in the east, supported by forces that came from Iraq. It was Syria and Lebanon in the north. The bad story for them was they lost the war, but they encouraged the Palestinian citizens of the land to evacuate the land so their forces can maneuver better. And the local Arabs of Israel fled either north or south or east. And most of them did this leaving their homes, encouraged by those Arab countries, intending to come back soon after the war will end, except the war ended when they lost and they could not come back. Some of them were leaving as the war progressed. About 500,000 Arabs from Israel became refugees in Egypt, Jordan, and Syria/Lebanon at the end of that war. But it's important to know that as Israel was created, the Jews of those countries were kicked out of those countries, the Arab countries, throughout North Africa, Jordan and Egypt and Syria and Iraq. And when 600,000, give or take, Arabs became Palestinian refugees, close to 1,800,000 Jews were forced to leave Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and other Arab countries. The UN never spoke about the Jewish refugees. And quite frankly, they are no longer refugees. Most of those Jewish refugees settled all over Seattle and Los Angeles and Paris, and many of them came to Israel. But from those 800,000 Jewish refugees at the end of the War of Independence, about 500,000 came to Israel and doubled the population of Israel when they came. And about 300,000 just dispersed around the world. And maybe because Jews are professional refugees, they never maintained the idea of being a refugee, but integrated with a society. I will not be surprised if you have some of them living literally in Seattle today, and you don't even know that once upon a time there were refugees from any of those countries. The borders, you see here on the map, the plans to divide Israel between Jews and the Arabs according to the different agreements that came by the UN. The result ended up here on the left. Israel took a little bit more than what we're supposed to take, but that's an important key element to understand. Samaria and Judea, which are marked in brown on the left map, this was taken by Jordan. This area was supposed to be Palestinian. There was nobody in the UN or the White House or elsewhere around the world who came to the Jordanians and said, hey guys, you took the land that was supposed to be Palestinian. It was kind of clear that one Arab took from another Arab and it's okay, the world can live with it quite well. It became an issue only in 1967 when Israel took this land away from the Palestinians. The map of the Gaza Strip showing the different areas of the Gaza Strip. Almost 2.2 million people live in this relatively small area. By the way, the biggest employer used to be Israel. And many Palestinians used to drive out of Gaza and go work in different locations in Israel. And one of the first attacks on October 7 was the border crossings, where people used to go out and get a job. In 1995, with the Oslo Accord, peace agreement was signed between Israel and Jordan and the Palestinians, and peace was supposed to show up. For a very short while, it was quite peaceful. And shortly after, when Arafat decided that he doesn't go progress the direction he wanted, he started the Intifada, the uprising on the Palestinian territories. And in 2001, the first rockets flew into Israel. Ever since, thousands of rockets were launched on Israel. In 2005, Israel decided to disengage from the Gaza Strip. All the Israeli civilians were evacuated. Not all of them left peacefully, but eventually all of them left. And the Gaza Strip became all Palestinian. The opportunity, by the way, was to make it into a new Hong Kong, a new place with growing economy that could have been very successful. Hamas has taken over the kind of democratic elections that took place in Gaza, brought Hamas up to power. Who is Hamas? Hamas is a fundamental Sunni Muslim organization. It's a terror organization. It's a proxy eventually of ISIS today, which they cooperate quite well with. And the basic convent of Hamas is to destroy Israel. And not only destroy Israel, but it's declaring that Israel is the first step in the jihad war that they are obligated to go on to conquer eventually the rest of the world, this way or the other. This is the gentleman in charge of Hamas, the head of Hamas today. And he's not a good guy. He is motivated into a holy war to go out onto and to literally cleanse Israel from the Jews living in it, and reestablish some Arab country in there. So Hamas intend and never hide its intentions to destroy Israel. When Hamas was elected in 2005, the leaders of Hamas that you can see on the picture kicked out a PLO president who's supposed to be the most moderate Palestinian leader. Hamas sees terrorism as a way of life. It's a principle legitimate for their organization. And that's how they operate under. The structure of Hamas is that they control the Gaza Strip completely. They have some good foot in the ground all over the West Bank. They have a civilian branch and they have a military branch. The civilian branch is, by the way, fed by a UN organization called UNRWA, which is a refugee arm that takes care of refugees. The UN has two different refugee offices that's operating around the world. One for the entire world and one just for the Palestinians. And that's UNRWA. UNRWA is the biggest employer in Gaza. And that's something to always remember. After Hamas got in power, obviously Israel tried to control the borders of Gaza better than we did before. You can see those articles from Arab newspapers. And while Hamas claimed that we are starving them or whatever doing, the basic newspaper of Egypt from August 1st, 2010 says there's no shortage of anything in Gaza. Everything is supplied in Gaza, and that's the situation. The Israeli government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, decided that it's good for them to support Hamas and separate Hamas from the PLO, which obviously turned out to be a big mistake. Netanyahu, on the one hand, did not negotiate with Hamas at all, but on the other hand, allowed big money to flow in, mostly from Qatar, into Gaza. And they were using all this money not to build any infrastructure, but eventually to build an underground city throughout the entire Gaza Strip and under. So obviously we made a wrong choice and went in that respect in the very wrong direction. The Arabs were building all those tunnels underneath. Some of them are as big as a tunnel that a vehicle can drive through. And the plan was to attack Israel. As a response, Israel created this fence that goes down into the ground with motion sensors and go up in the air, and was supposed to stop any kind of invasion from that side, except the fence was built to stop individuals, not a whole army trying to cross. Egypt plays the role as it plays the Egyptians. You have to realize that Hamas is part of the Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt, which is the large organization that tries to get rid of the Egyptian government. In fact, Islamic Brotherhood, these were the people who were in charge of assassinating Anwar Sadat. And one of the reasons he was assassinated is that he actually signed a peace agreement with Israel in 1978. By the way, when this peace agreement was signed, I had the privilege to be a cadet in the Israeli Army officer school. And I happened to stand in the guard of honor when Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin was signing the contract, which was kind of a historic moment in life, and a break of a week from training. All we had to train was marching. And it was kind of funny because they made us march very, very well. At least it looks like very well. And many years later, the same sergeant major who was in charge of marching us in this event, he became a major, I think, and in charge of all the big events in the Israeli army. And at that time, I was already a reservist, getting a little older, and I was a commander of a reconnaissance unit. And I woke up one morning, they invited me for a service. Apparently I was selected to be like one of the best officers in the army, and I was given some decoration. And I had to go up the stage and shake the hand of the chief of staff. And I had to do some, walk like a soldier for a few steps. And the guy came over and looked at me and he says, who trained you to march? And I said, it was you. He said, it can't be me. It was a funny moment. But I guess as a reservist, I didn't feel the need to do the practice so well. So Hamas did a very good deception on Israel. They pretended to do what Netanyahu was offering them and use the money or whatever, but they were building more and more force to be used against us. Thousands of Palestinians used to cross this border every morning and come to work in Israel, basically bring a lot of Israeli money back into Gaza. Why now? Why was October 7 selected to be the day that they attacked Israel? And the reason is that the last few years for Israel were good in the Middle East, and Israel was making more and more connections with Arab countries in the Middle East. You may have heard of what we call the Abraham Accord and the agreements with Sudan and agreements with Morocco and other Arab countries. And the big step was supposed to be during October 2023 with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis were to gain a lot from this agreement, and so is Israel. But this was a big threat on Iran. And Hamas is a proxy of Iran, as well as Hezbollah in the north is. And it was a big threat on Tehran that Israel will cooperate with the Saudis, and one of the ways to stop it was to launch an attack from Gaza on Israel, and that's why the Iranians encouraged this attack so well. It would have played also against Hamas eventually, because agreement with Saudi would have called for some better solution between Israel and the Palestinians, supported by Saudi money, and this would have ended the control of Hamas eventually on Gaza. We were looking for quiet, and that's why we were not awake enough to acknowledge what was going on, because the sign was on the wall. I mean, we should have looked better on what was about to happen on October 7. Early morning, October 7, Hamas simply knocked down the wall. And 3,000 Hamas soldiers went out and attacked all the civilian communities right next to the fence, including a big music party that was taking place with some 4,000 teenagers who were partying nearby. They went in, and what they did was to butcher the people that they could reach, rape and murder and burn down the bodies and whatever else. But that's what was going on October 7. It was the end of the Feast of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles in Israel, and that's why most of the army was sent home for the celebration. And we did not have enough troops on that particular day to protect the border, which explains the success they had that morning. Hamas, as we claim here, is a proxy of ISIS and definitely behave in the same ways ISIS does. And when they talk about ethnical cleansing and genocide, that's exactly what they're doing wherever they can. There were 3 waves of invasion of Israel. The first wave was the Hamas warriors that came in, and then came a whole group of people whose job was to kidnap and to loot, and eventually civilians, just plain Egyptian civilians who came in mostly to loot. Israeli secret services intercepted a phone call that was made by one of those young guys from Gaza. And the phone call goes this way. He's calling his parents. And he says, he asked his father to call his mother as well to listen to the call. And he said he's calling from a phone of a girl he just murdered, but he also already killed 10 people. And he's bragging about what he did. And his mother kept saying to him, thank God, you did well, my son, you did well. I wish you have taken me with you. And that's the phone call between a son and his mother about the story that took place there. I have taken a support mission. I don't know if we can hear it. Unfortunately, I guess you can't hear the sound. Oh, you can read. I have taken a small mission from DC a few weeks ago to see what happened. And this young and good-looking captain, she served as the IDF spokesman. And I hope you can see the subtitles under and that deals with the question, are there innocent people in Gaza? When Gaza gets that kind of support from its people. We do have a whole bunch of hostages that they keep. We don't even know if they're alive or dead. Most likely, at least half of them are dead, and they just kidnap bodies. And the rest are held in the tunnels by Hamas. It has taken us probably a day and a half to wake up in Israel from the beginning of the attack on Saturday morning. But on Sunday afternoon, we cleared all the invaders from the area where they invaded, and we started a big attack on Gaza. Again, we were attacking the military targets of Hamas and not civilians, except the fact that they built their headquarters underneath the hospitals, just knowing that Israel will not attack the hospitals. Which brings us into a question. Israeli army got into one of those hospitals, and they found videos in the hospital of some of the hostages being brought in to be taken care of in the hospital, which means the physicians there were aware of exactly what's going on. What kind of physicians are there, these people? The first steps Israel made were in big forces and with big destruction of wherever we went. We wanted to scare them out, and we wanted to be able to invade the Gaza Strip as easy as we could. The inner circle around Israel is Lebanon, where Hezbollah is the organization, the Shiite organization, operating under Iran that is shooting Israel. Syria is definitely a proxy of Iran these days. In the Gaza Strip, we do have the Hamas, and in the West Bank, Hamas is trying to provoke as much as they can. We usually have the PLO to try and stop them. Right now, the PLO is not really doing any serious work stopping them. And in the larger circle, we have Iraq, who is supporting them. We have Iran, who's supply ballistic missiles to all their proxies. And of all places, we have a group of Yemenites attacking Israel and attacking international sailing in the Red Sea, all the way to the fact that the U.S. Is now attacking with Great Britain some targets in Yemen. Obviously, we get the support of the U.S. and the support of Germany, which are the only two loud voices that support Israel. We have developed air defense system which defends Israel around the very simple Iron Dome that I'm assuming you all heard about, and that's a system that can intercept rockets. We have David Sling, which is a similar system that can intercept longer range missiles, and obviously we have the Arrow system that we developed with some of your money to stop ballistic missiles. That's how it looks like when there's a rocket attack on Israel. It might be even look a little colorful, but trust me, it's not fun. In the West Bank, we had some issues, but luckily not too many. It may be a moment to say a word about what's the West Bank. You all know the term West Bank, but West Bank of what? The Jordan River, yeah. So if you look at the map, and the Jordan River runs into the Dead Sea all the way from the Sea of Galilee in the north, so the entire Israel is West Bank. And when you talk about the West Bank with Arabs, there's always the political West Bank and the geographical West Bank. And there's a big distinction between the two because the rest of Israel is West Bank geographically. Politically, the West Bank is this area surrounded here. And that's the part of the West Bank that was under Jordan between 1948 and 1967. And if there ever will be a Palestinian state, that's where it's going to be. So that's important to understand. You look at our northern border, the right side of the map next to Syria and highlighted in kind of light green, that's the Golan Heights, about 50 miles long and 10 miles wide. And that's the buffer between us and Syria. You can see the border of Lebanon, and the entire south area is controlled by Hezbollah. And what we're trying to reach right now is an international agreement that will push Hezbollah about 10 miles further north. And I'm guessing that if the result in Gaza will be good enough for us, Hezbollah will have to accept and go north there. So are all Palestinians terrorists? Or all of them are a supporter of Hamas? So in the last few days, there have been some demonstrations in Gaza against Hamas. I think some of the Gazans had enough of this war and they are demonstrating, but the reality is that the majority of Gaza support Hamas. At the moment, we have a few 100,000 Israelis who are called back into reserve and are fighting either in Gaza and around. It says here on my presentation that over 300,000 Israelis, but actually already less. The military already released quite a lot of them to send them back to work. Rockets were fired and are still fired into Israel, but in very small numbers, and no longer throughout Israel, but are now only fired in the very close area to Gaza. I started by saying that our government is not functioning as we would like it to function and was not making the right decision mostly because our Prime Minister was involved in some legal issues, and he was trying to slow down the legal system of Israel. But the Israeli public stood up, and the day after the war began, all the public services were supplied in the country by volunteers in an amazing way, almost unbelievable. Anywhere from helping the evacuation of the citizens around Gaza and in the Galilee, through opening substitute to education systems, supplying food, supplying services in every part you can think of, and the unity and solidarity of the Israeli civilians is remarkable. Something to learn from. Is this conflict global? It is. Russia and China are supporting Iran and its proxies. I'm assuming it has a potential of developing into a much bigger thing, and I'm not sure that the players of the game actually wanted to go there. So my estimations is that it's going to fade slowly, and as soon as Hamas is totally destroyed, this will probably be the end of this round. I will be very surprised if Iran and or Hezbollah in the north will decide to join the war, especially if Hamas is hit well enough in the south there. Meanwhile, around the world, we are getting some very nasty comments, and including here in the US and including some of your leading universities. And some of those comments were anywhere between very anti-Semite to stupid, I would say, and you wouldn't expect. I hope I'm not going to lose my popularity here, but I always thought myself to be a very liberal person, and my understanding of what's liberal is that somebody who holds his strong opinions but is willing to listen and to allow other opinions around. And it looks like your liberals found a way to say it's either our way or the highway. And the idea of liberalism, the way I understand it, that you can accept all other opinions, and that's the essence of being a liberal, was killed here in a way that being a liberal here is holding sometimes a very ignorant opinion without even willing to listen to other. And I'm not sure that your liberals here understand that the people they support in Gaza are people who went out to rape and to butcher and kill and people and forget what they're trying to do to us. They're our enemy. But these are people who would not allow their women to vote or to have any rights. Women in this part of the world are still property. And I'm not sure that your liberals would agree with the idea of women being property. And that's just one item. So I find it probably and mostly a result of ignorance. So the international response was quite embarrassing and sad in a way. It's both on the United Nations or the Red Cross who get access to the Palestinian prisoners we hold, but doesn't get any access to our hostages, and doesn't even try to get access. They say that, well, it's about the Hamas to agree, but to put any pressure, none of it was made. This presentation that actually has the opportunity to put tears in your eyes should also put lots of hope in your hearts. It's not about the sad story happening in Israel right now. It's about one more step of fighting evil. And we've been doing it for a long time, and we're going to keep on doing it. Pastor Shane introduced me earlier and said my great-grandfather came to Israel. My great-grandfather came to Israel in 1906, when Israel was still part of the Ottoman Empire. Turkey was controlling the Middle East. My great-grandfather walked half the way from Russia, where he came from, to Israel, encouraged by the prophecies he learned that a day should come and the desert should be turned into green valley again. And that's why he came. And he made his share in turning the desert into farmland. I was very privileged to be able to buy a small piece of real estate that was my grandmother's wedding gift when she got married. And on the same place where my father and uncle grew up as kids, before Israel was even established. I'm raising now my grandson, because I'm sharing this piece of real estate with my daughter and son-in-law. Which is an amazing opportunity for me, my first and only grandson so far. There's some young people here, but one day you will find out that grandchildren is probably the best thing that can ever happen to you. I'm getting WhatsApp text from my grandson to come wipe his behind. He's already texting, and 3.5 years old, and he runs away from home as far as he can go and from his parents, and he runs away to me, obviously, the other side of the garden. So we are on this ground to stay. We are on the ground to hold it and to make it bloom and to make it nicer. And I think that what the Arabs forgot to consider was the spirit of the Israelis. And as sad as some of those days are, it's part of the big story, and we are there to complete it. I will be speaking in a church in Oregon in 2 days, and this just happened to be that church sitting on the Sea of Galilee singing early morning. They went out to see the sunrise on the Sea of Galilee, and just sat on and sang. This was only a few months ago. So that's our target. That's what we're aiming to do. So this is pretty much the end of my presentation. And I would like to be able to answer questions if you have any. Anybody have any questions? I have the microphone. I can send it to you. Many of you were supposed to get on a plane and fly the very long trip to Israel only a couple of months ago. We were very, very busy dealing with cancellation. I mean, the cancellation of the hotels was a relatively easy part. More complicated was dealing with the airlines and making sure that we cancel everything on the right day. So we don't. We wanted the airlines to cancel first, so we can be fully refunded. Yeah.
Oh, why did Egypt not want Gaza in '87?
Sorry?
Why did Egypt not want Gaza in 87?
Because it has too many Palestinians in it. The question was, why didn't Egypt wanted Gaza as part of Egypt? And that's the answer. They had Gaza until 1967, and half the population of the Gaza Strip, give or take, is Palestinian. Egypt never gave the Palestinian people in Gaza citizenship. They had eventually around 1 million people that had no citizenship at all. And that's part of the Egyptian policy. Yes.
Do you speak Jewish?
Sorry?
Do you speak Hebrew?
I speak Hebrew, absolutely.
Can you say hi in Hebrew?
Well, hi sounds like hi in any language, but we say shalom in Hebrew, and shalom means hi, also means peace.
Can you say go home in?
You want to go home now?
Hi, I've read some arguments online from our liberals. It seems that the idea of modern Israel being this colonial power comes from like assuming that in 1948, like the Jews just all migrated and took over a bunch of land instead of like a lot of them being there already.
That's a big mistake.
Do you know like the history of like before 1948 of like?
Absolutely. The history before 1948 is that nobody actually, that's Ronnie and myself. I'm just going to mute it and let it run. If we go back to the late 1800s, the entire Middle East was under the control of Turkey, what was before the Ottoman Empire. The land of Israel was almost empty, and if you don't trust me, go read the story written by an excellent American writer. At least I thought it was excellent. I grew up sitting on his lap. His name is Samuel Clemens, known as Mark Twain in America. And he wrote a book that I highly recommend for everybody to read. And the name of the book is Pleasure Excursion in the Holy Land. Mark Twain came to Israel in 1867. And when you ask yourself today, who is right, the Jews or the Arabs, but who came first to the land of Israel? According to Mark Twain, he came first. If you read his description, he's coming into almost an empty land. Most of the country was desert, part were swamps, and mostly because it was abandoned and neglected. Ever since the late 1800s, Jews started coming back to the land. All kind of reasons in nationalism in Europe. The land was nearly empty, and Jews were buying land from the Ottoman Empire, mostly from the empire itself, in some cases from individuals, and land was purchased in Israel. In 1919, at the end of the First World War, Turkey was pushed out. Great Britain came in, mostly because of the Suez Canal, by the way. It was the main reason for the British to come, and access to the oil in Iraq and the goods in India. And in 1948, there's about, when the war begins, about the same amount of Jews and Arabs living in the country. About 500,000 Jews and about 800,000 Arabs are living in the country. By the way, in 1920, the leaders of the Arabs back then, and the main problems of the Middle East, unfortunately, were created by Great Britain and France. All those agreements between real colonial nations started then, because when the Ottomans were kicked out, the leaders of the Zionists, of the Jews in the Middle East, reached agreements with the leader of the Arabs in the Middle East. This was the friend of Lawrence of Arabia, was Prince Faisal from Saudi. And the British promised him that if the war will end with them winning, they will make him the king of Greater Syria. And Great Syria was supposed to include Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and Jordan and Israel and Saudi. But then they also promised Israel to the Jews. And the British, like British, they never got confused about promising the same piece of land to two different entities. And eventually they got involved and they said, okay, made a mistake. This is going to be part of the Jews and you get the rest. And so we still had quite a lot of Arab citizens in what was supposed to become Israel. And the deal was they can either leave and join the greater Arab nation or stay in Israel. One of the above was an option as citizens. But then Faisal was kicked out of Syria by the French. The French was also given a promise that they're going to get Lebanon and Syria. So they kicked him out. And that was the end of the great Arab kingdom. And shortly after, there was a revolution against him in Saudi Arabia, and his family, basically a family from Saudi, lost most of what they're supposed to have. The Palestinians, the Arabs in Israel, were literally left with no leader. And the leader who came to lead them eventually was a guy named Hajj Amin al-Husseini. And Mr. Husseini was a terrorist. And that's where terror problem began in what became later on Israel. So that's basically the story. There was about the same amount of Jews and Arabs in the land. If they followed the map that I was talking about earlier, we would have had the two-state solution that was offered, what everybody talks about recently, would have been inactive ever since 1948. But the Arabs said no. They started the war. The war just ended not like they expected. It ended when they were kicked out. Yes, sir.
The term Palestinian, as I understand it, is only like 100 years old.
That's absolutely true. Well, not really.
They've been expelled from a number of countries, like in Kuwait they were expelled. They go, who are they? Where do they come
That's an excellent question. Yasser Arafat once said that they're the descendants of the Philistines, but that's obviously crap. The name Palestine was given by the Romans to the territory between Syria and Egypt. Palestine was actually Syria. It was called Syria Palestina by the Romans. And in a later period, after the Jews kept rebelling too many times in Israel and in Judea, the Romans decided that the province Judea will become part of the province Palestine, Syria, Palestine, and this became what we call Palestina Secunda. The second Palestine was what Israel was made by the Romans. And that's around the beginning of the 2nd century. So the name was there, and people just kept the territory's name as Palestine. And when Israel was established, there were many questions of how to name the new country. Some voices said we're going to name it Zion, some said we're going to name it Judea. Eventually they decided to call it Israel. And when we called the territory Israel, the Palestinians just kept the other name. But the entity of the Palestinian, who are they? So these are Arabs who immigrated to the same place from all over the Middle East. At the same time, my great-grandfather immigrated to that piece of land. And because of Jewish immigration to that area, jobs were created, infrastructure was made, and many Arabs just came in. So many of the Palestinians today go by the name El Masri, which means they are Egyptians. Many goes by the name of El Maghrabi, which means they are from the Maghreb. They're from Morocco, Libya, or Tunisia, who immigrated to that part of the world. And many came from Iraq. And within the Palestinian group, there are big wars going on between the Egyptians to the Moroccans to the Iraqis until today. They go by families and mostly by tribe entity. So that's who they are today.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to end tonight, but Nir's going to hang out, and you can come up and ask him a question, okay? So let's pray, and then we'll get going. Lord, thanks for this opportunity to learn about this land, God, that we read in your Bible, and that you have plans and purposes and a special look. Lord, you have these people and this land, God, you care for. God, we pray that we as a church would be supporters of your plan and your people. God, we pray that you would bless the nation Israel and that we could be a part of that blessing. Lord, we ask a blessing on Nir and his travels, and we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, God bless you guys. Nir will hang out, ask him some questions.